The Nexhari fleet materialized at the edge of Sol system. 947 warships. Dreadnoughts, carriers, destroyers arranged in perfect combat formations across 3 million kilometers of space. High Executor Salvex observed the primitive human defenses from the command throne of his flagship Eternal Dominion and allowed himself a thin smile. 26 orbital platforms. 18 defense stations. No capital ships in sight. The intelligence reports had been accurate. This would take less than an hour. All batteries charged, reported his tactical officer. Enemy platforms are powering weapons but their output is negligible. Energy signatures indicate pre-contact technology. Predictable, Salvex said. Open a channel to the human command structure. Let them hear mercy before annihilation. The transmission beam lanced toward Earth. Salvex composed his words carefully, savoring this moment. The Nexhari had subjugated 47 species in the past millennium. Humanity would be 48. Primitive vessels of Sol system, this is High Executor Salvex of the Nexhari Ascendancy. Your species violated Galactic Council Decree 17 Alpha by manufacturing kinetic weapons systems. We have come to enforce compliance. You have 30 minutes to power down all military installations and prepare for occupation. Resistance will result in complete orbital cleansing. Static hissed back. Then a human voice, calm and measured. High Executor, this is Commander Marcus Okonkwo of Terran Defense. Negative on your 30-minute deadline. We're not powering down. Salvex's smile widened. They always refused at first. It made the crushing more satisfying. Commander Okonkwo, I have 947 warships. You have orbital stations built from pre-FTL materials. Do you understand the mathematics of your situation? I do, Okonkwo replied. You have 947 ships. We have something better. We have patience. The transmission cut. Salvex gestured dismissively. Forward elements, engage defensive platforms. Demonstrate overwhelming force. When they see 12 orbital installations vaporized in the opening salvo, their surrender will come quickly. The Nexhari vanguard surged forward. 48 destroyers, shields shimmering with multi-layered energy matrices. Their plasma batteries locked onto the nearest defense platforms and fired in perfect synchronization. Brilliant emerald streams crossed the void at light speed, each shot carrying enough energy to crack a moon. The human platforms absorbed the strikes. Shields flared but held. Energy output readings remained stable. Salvex frowned. Tactical analysis. Why are their shields withstanding our fire? Unknown, High Executor. Energy readings indicate standard pre-contact defensive screens, but dissipation rates are abnormal. They should have collapsed on first impact. On the holographic display, the human platforms rotated. Weapon ports opened along their flanks. Not energy emitters. Physical launch tubes. Hundreds of them. Lieutenant Park's voice echoed across TCSS Reckoning's bridge, professional and crisp. Railgun platforms 1 through 12 locked and tracking. Enemy destroyers at 42,000 kilometers and closing. Commander Okonkwo leaned back in his command chair, fingers steepled. Around him, holographic displays showed the Nexhari formation in perfect detail. Every ship. Every weapon. Every shield generator. They'd been studying Nexhari combat doctrine for 9 years, ever since their first scout probe entered the system. 9 years of preparation. 9 years of building weapons the Council couldn't ban because they technically weren't weapons at all. Chief Dubois, reactor status? All reactors operating at optimal parameters, Commander. Displacement field generators charged to 132%. She's purring like a kitten. Zhang, confirm targeting priorities. Officer Zhang's hands danced across her console. Confirmed. Forward destroyers tagged as primary targets. Mass driver solutions calculated. Firing sequence ready on your mark. Okonkwo watched the Nexhari ships advance with casual arrogance. They expected shields to make them invulnerable. They expected energy weapons. They expected a conventional battle. Weapons free, he said quietly. Fire. The orbital platform spoke. 12 railguns fired simultaneously. Not energy. Not plasma. Solid tungsten penetrators, each massing half a ton, accelerated to 0.4 light speed in the space of 300 meters. The kinetic energy release from each projectile exceeded 15 megatons TNT equivalent. They crossed 42,000 kilometers in less than a second. The Nexhari shields were designed to deflect and dissipate energy. Brilliant defensive matrices that could absorb gigawatt plasma streams and redirect laser fire across broad electromagnetic spectrums. They did absolutely nothing to stop solid matter traveling at 120,000 kilometers per second. The first penetrator hit destroyer Radiant Victory amidships. The tungsten punched through shields like they weren't there, vaporized the forward armor in a plasma flash, continued through engineering spaces, reactor chamber, crew quarters, and exited the far side trailing molten metal. The ship folded in half. Reactor containment failed 3 seconds later. The destroyer became a miniature sun for exactly 4.2 seconds, then dispersed into superheated gas and debris. 11 more destroyers died identically. Hulls compressed, shattered, vented atmosphere in glowing streams. The vacuum filled with wreckage and expanding plasma clouds. 12 ships destroyed in 90 seconds of engagement. Aboard Eternal Dominion, alarms shrieked. Salvex gripped his command throne as tactical displays painted the disaster in brutal detail. What happened? Report. Unknown weapon type, High Executor. No energy signature detected prior to impact. Projectile velocity exceeds anything in our combat database. Shields provided 0 defensive value. The tactical officer's voice cracked slightly. Destroyers Radiant Victory through Dawn's Edge are destroyed. No survivors. Impossible. Our shields can withstand sustained bombardment from. They're firing again. The platforms rotated. Another volley screamed across the void. 24 tungsten penetrators this time, targeting the Nexhari cruiser line. The larger ships fared no better than the destroyers. Shields flared uselessly as solid matter moving at relativistic speeds punched completely through hulls, reactors, crew sections. 5 cruisers ruptured, atmosphere geysering from massive breach points. 2 more broke apart under structural stress. Metal groaned and screamed across electromagnetic frequencies as ships designed for centuries of service died in seconds. Salvex forced his breathing steady. 17 ships destroyed. The humans had orbital defense platforms. Primitive installations that shouldn't pose threat to a modern battle fleet. Yet 17 Nexhari vessels had been annihilated in under 3 minutes of combat. All ships, evasive patterns. Disperse formation. Identify weapon locations and saturate with maximum firepower. The Nexhari fleet scattered, maintaining cohesion while increasing separation. Every plasma battery opened fire simultaneously. The orbital platforms vanished under emerald storms. Energy readings spiked off the scale as gigawatts of destructive power hammered defensive shields. The human platforms held. Shields cycled and regenerated. Armor ablated but maintained integrity. And the railguns kept firing. They modified mining equipment, Okonkwo said conversationally as his ship watched the battle unfold. Asteroid mining platforms use mass drivers to launch or containers toward processing facilities. Technically not military hardware. The Council banned energy weapons, missiles, antimatter devices, exotic matter weapons. Never thought to ban mining tools. Lieutenant Park allowed herself a thin smile. We've been manufacturing them for 8 years. 240 platforms in Sol system alone. Each platform carries 12 railguns with reload capacity for 60 shots. The Council should have been more specific with their legislation, Du Bois added from engineering. They said no weapons. These aren't weapons. They're industrial equipment operating at enhanced specifications. On the main display, another wave of Nexhari ships disintegrated. Cruisers shattered. Destroyers folded. One dreadnought took 3 penetrators simultaneously and came apart like a child's toy struck with a hammer. Hull plating ripped away in massive sections. Internal bulkheads compressed. The reactor breach consumed half the ship before explosive decompression scattered the remains across 5,000 kilometers. Salvex stared at tactical readouts that made no sense. 38 ships destroyed. 38 vessels of the Nexhari Ascendancy, equipped with shields that had turned aside entire planetary defense networks, annihilated by projectiles. Physical matter. Solid chunks of metal accelerated to impossible velocities. This technology shouldn't exist. Our intelligence indicated pre-contact civilization. No FTL capability. No energy shielding. How do they have weapons that bypass our defenses? Because we studied your broadcasts, Okonkwo's voice cut through the command channel, uninvited. For 9 years, High Executor. We watched every transmission. Analyzed every tactical doctrine. Studied every engagement you broadcasted so proudly across the galaxy. We saw how your shields work. Energy dispersion matrices. Brilliant against energy weapons. Useless against matter at relativistic velocities. Salvex's face darkened. You deliberately prepared for. You announced your arrival 3 months ago. Sent that lovely ultimatum about enforcing council decrees. Gave us exact date and time of your fleet's materialization. We've had 94 days to position assets and calculate firing solutions. Did you think we'd simply surrender? You cannot win. I have 900 ships. Had, Okonkwo corrected. You had 947. Current count is 893 and dropping. Our platforms reload every 18 seconds. Do the mathematics, High Executor. The Nexhari fleet reoriented, pulling back from the orbital platform's effective range. Salvex slammed his fist against the throne's armrest. Concentrate fire. All ships target platforms 1 through 12. Sustained bombardment. Those installations must have limits. The fleet focused its fury. Every weapon system discharged simultaneously. The 6 forward platforms vanished under apocalyptic energy release. Shields collapsed. Armor sublimated. Structure melted under terawatts of sustained power. 3 platforms disintegrated completely. 3 more went dark, power cores destroyed. Salvex felt a surge of satisfaction. The primitives had surprised them, yes. Killed dozens of ships with unexpected weapons. But weight of numbers and superior firepower would prevail. Continue bombardment. Destroy every installation in orbit. Then we sterilize the surface and... High Executor. His sensor officer's voice carried pure terror. Contact. Multiple signatures emerging from lunar far side. Designation, capital ships. Counting 12, no, 20, 36 vessels. Dreadnought class. They're powering weapons. The tactical display updated. 36 human warships materialized from behind Luna's mass shadow, drives flaring brilliant blue-white. Each ship massed 18 million tons. Each bristled with launch tubes. And they were accelerating directly toward the Nexhari fleet at 0.3 light speed. Aboard TCSS Reckoning, Lieutenant Park updated targeting data. Fleet deployment successful, Commander. All ships report weapons charged and tracking solutions locked. Okonkwo's expression remained calm. Almost serene. Signal Fleet Command. Execute Doctrine Hammer. Engage at will. The human dreadnoughts opened fire. Not 12 railguns per platform. 600 accelerator tubes per ship. 21,600 tungsten penetrators launched simultaneously, each massing 1 ton, each traveling at 0.45 light speed. The space between Luna and the Nexheri fleet filled with projectiles. A solid wall of relativistic death crossing the void at impossible velocities. Salvex saw his death approaching in real time. Saw it calculated in precise trajectories on tactical displays. Saw 21,000 projectiles bearing down on his fleet with mathematical inevitability. All ships. Maximum acceleration. Full retreat vector. Emergency. The first wave hit. Shields meant nothing. Armor meant nothing. Nexheri dreadnoughts designed to dominate battlefields crumpled like foil. Cruisers shattered. Destroyers vaporized completely. Eternal Dominion took 18 penetrators across her length. The flagship broke apart in sections, each piece tumbling through space trailing atmosphere and molten metal. Salvex felt his throne lurch as the bridge section separated. Emergency systems screamed. Hull pressure dropped. And through the viewports, he saw dozens more ships dying. Saw his fleet disintegrating. Saw human dreadnoughts advancing with cold precision, railguns cycling, reloading, firing again. How many? He gasped into emergency communications. How many ships do they have? Okonkwo's voice answered, carried across open channels for the entire dying fleet to hear. Enough, High Executor. We've been building for 9 years. 36 dreadnoughts. 84 cruisers. 216 destroyers. And every single one carries enough kinetic weapons to crack continents. You came to enforce council decrees against human military production. You're absolutely correct. We did violate the weapons ban. His voice dropped, cold and final. We built something worse. The second volley launched. 21,000 more penetrators screamed across vacuum. The Nexheri fleet tried to scatter, tried to flee, tried desperately to outrun projectiles traveling at 45% of light speed. It was mathematically impossible. The tungsten caught them. Hulls compressed. Reactors breached. Ships became expanding spheres of plasma and debris. In 90 seconds, the Nexheri Ascendancy's enforcement fleet lost another 138 vessels. Salvex floated in the dying bridge section of Eternal Dominion, emergency containment barely holding atmosphere. Through the fractured viewports, he watched his civilization's pride dissolve into wreckage. Watched human ships advance with terrifying calm. Watched tungsten penetrators tear through formations like bullets through paper. The mathematics had reversed. The overwhelming numerical advantage meant nothing against weapons that ignored shields and moved too fast to evade. His communications officer, bleeding from a head wound, managed to access emergency channels. High Executor, all fleet elements requesting retreat authorization. Casualties exceed 40%. We cannot. Denied. Salvex's voice came out steady despite the horror. Despite watching everything he'd built crumble. Signal all remaining ships. Full assault. Commit every vessel. If we cannot win, we ensure these primitives pay maximum cost for their TCSS Reckoning's weapons charged. Every railgun. Every accelerator tube. Every kinetic system across the human fleet powered up simultaneously. Capacitors whined at maximum load. Displacement field generators pushed past rated specifications, holding solid matter in magnetic suspension while electromagnetic coils prepared to release devastating acceleration. Commander Okonkwo leaned forward in his command chair. Watched the Nexhari fleet commit its remaining forces in desperate final assault. Watched 800 ships accelerate toward Earth with weapons blazing. Watched them come with the courage of the doomed. Fleet Command, this is reckoning actual. All ships prepare for synchronized strike. Full alpha pattern. On my mark. The human fleet's weapons aligned. 21,600 barrels per salvo. 36 dreadnoughts ready to fire. 925,000 tungsten penetrators loaded and targeting. Enough kinetic energy to shatter moons. Enough raw destructive power to annihilate fleets. The space between forces closed. 30,000 kilometers. 20,000. 15,000. Close enough to see individual ships on visual displays. Close enough to count armor plates. Close enough for final words. Okonkwo's finger hovered over the firing authorization. Mark. 925,000 tungsten penetrators launched simultaneously. The electromagnetic coils discharged with power output exceeding most planetary grids. Displacement fields collapsed in precisely calculated sequences. Solid matter accelerated to 0.45 light speed in less than 200 meters. The space between human and Nexhari fleets became a solid wall of relativistic death. The impacts began 3.2 seconds later. Nexhari dreadnought Celestial Wrath took 412 penetrators across her forward sections. The first penetrator vaporized shields and punched through 12 decks before exiting the far side. The next 411 followed identical paths, separated by microseconds. The ship didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist as a coherent structure. Hull plating sublimated into plasma. Internal bulkheads compressed to molecular thickness. The fusion reactor lost containment in the exact moment structural integrity failed completely. What had been an 18 million-ton warship became an expanding sphere of superheated gas 40 meters in diameter, then dispersed into vacuum. 47 more dreadnoughts died identically in the next 90 seconds. Aboard the shattered bridge section of Eternal Dominion, High Executor Salvex floated in zero gravity, held by emergency restraints. Blood from a dozen wounds drifted past his face in crimson globules. Through the fractured viewports, he watched his fleet disintegrate. Watched ships he'd commanded for decades crumple like aluminum foil. Watched formations that had conquered 47 species dissolve into wreckage and debris. The tactical displays still functioned, painting disaster in precise detail. Fleet strength, 412 vessels remaining. Casualties per minute, 68 ships. Projected survival time at current attrition rate, 6.1 minutes. All ships, he transmitted on emergency channels. Break formation. Scatter and engage individually. Target human vessels exclusively. Ignore defensive platforms. If we're dying, we take them with us. The Nexhari fleet abandoned cohesion. 412 ships accelerated in 412 different vectors, drives screaming at maximum output. They closed on the human dreadnoughts with weapons blazing. Plasma batteries discharged. Particle beams lanced through vacuum. Energy missiles streaked toward targets. If shields wouldn't protect them, perhaps overwhelming close-range firepower and numerical superiority could still achieve something. Anything. Commander Okonkwo watched the enemy formation collapse on his tactical display. Watched desperate ships charging forward with the courage of the doomed. Lieutenant Park updated defensive calculations in real time, fingers dancing across her console. Enemy vessels committing to close engagement. Range dropping below 10,000 kilometers. Point defense systems tracking, but they're accepting losses to close distance. Let them come, Okonkwo said calmly. He touched his communication panel. Fleet command, activate secondary defensive arrays. Authorization Okonkwo 77 Gamma. Across the human fleet, hull plating retracted. New weapon ports opened. Not railguns. Something different. Chief Dubois monitored power distribution from engineering. Secondary arrays online. Point defense networks at full capacity. Capacitor banks charged to maximum. We're drawing 140% of rated reactor output. Will she hold? She's beautiful, Commander. Built for exactly this scenario. The Nexhari ships close to 8,000 kilometers. 6,000. 4,000. Close enough for their energy weapons to achieve maximum effectiveness. Close enough to see individual hull details on visual displays. Plasma batteries fired in sustained bombardment. Particle beams carved through space at light speed. The human shields absorbed the punishment, energy matrices glowing brilliant blue-white as terawatts of destructive power hammered against defensive screens. Then the point defense systems activated. Every human ship bristled with close-in weapon systems. Not massive railguns designed for fleet engagement. Smaller accelerators. Thousands of them. Each firing solid projectiles at lower velocities but at absolutely devastating rates. TCSS Reckoning alone mounted 2,400 point defense cannons. Each cannon fired 60 rounds per second. Tungsten pellets massing only 2 kilograms each, but traveling at 0.1 light speed. The mathematics were simple and brutal. 144,000 projectiles per second from a single ship. 36 dreadnoughts meant 5,184,000 projectiles per second saturating local space. The approaching Nexhari ships flew into a solid wall of tungsten. Shields meant nothing. Armor ablated instantly under sustained kinetic bombardment. Hull plating shattered. Internal systems disintegrated. Crews died before they could scream. Destroyer Swift Vengeance lasted 4.3 seconds before 178,000 impacts reduced it to fragments. Cruiser Radiant Dawn folded in half under the kinetic stress, reactor breach splitting the ship into 2 tumbling pieces. Dreadnought Eternal Sovereign managed 6.8 seconds before catastrophic structural failure. The bridge section separated cleanly, rotating through space trailing atmosphere and debris while the engineering section exploded in a fusion fireball. Nexhari pilot Vex Theron screamed into his fighter's communication system as his carrier shattered around him. He'd launched 40 seconds ago for close attack runs against human vessels. Now his launch bay was venting into vacuum, the carrier's spine broken in 3 places, fusion reactors going critical. His fighter spun through the expanding debris field, dodging hull fragments and frozen bodies. Command, this is Wing 7 Actual. Carrier Ascendant Glory is destroyed. Repeat, destroyed. I'm reading catastrophic casualties across the... A tungsten pellet moving at 30,000 kilometers per second hit his fighter's cockpit. Vex Theron and his ship vaporized simultaneously into expanding plasma. Their shields were built for the last war, Lieutenant Park observed, monitoring the carnage with professional detachment. Energy weapons, plasma bombardment, particle beams. We're fighting the next one. Kinetics don't care about energy dispersion matrices. Officer Zhang intercepted Nexhari communications. Commander, picking up multiple enemy transmissions. Translating now. She paused, listening. They're begging their fleet command for retreat authorization. Requesting emergency FTL jump coordinates. Some ships are broadcasting surrender offers. Denied, Okonkwo said flatly. They came to our system. They threatened our species with orbital cleansing. They fired first. He leaned forward slightly. Continue engagement. No survivors leave Sol system. The human fleet advanced. Railguns cycled. Point defense networks maintained relentless fire. Tungsten screamed across vacuum in solid streams. The Nexhari fleet tried to retreat, but the mathematics were unforgiving. Human ships accelerated at 212 gravities with inertial dampening that made such forces survivable. Nexhari vessels maxed at 74 gravities. The pursued could not outrun the pursuers. Could not fight. Could only die. Salvex watched his fleet counter drop. 300 ships. 240. 198. Every second brought fresh disaster. Every tactical update showed new casualties. His communications officer, barely conscious from blood loss, managed a final report. High Executor, all fleet elements reporting critical damage. 74 ships requesting immediate evacuation authorization. 41 ships have lost all propulsion. 23 ships broadcasting white flag signals. We must surrender. There's nothing left to. How? Salvex interrupted, voice hollow. How did primitives accomplish this? Our intelligence said pre-contact civilization. No FTL. No exotic weapons. No capital ships. He stared at the tactical display showing human dreadnoughts advancing with terrifying precision. Where did they hide 36 capital ships? How did they build this fleet without our knowledge? Okonkwo's voice answered across open channels. You studied our civilian broadcasts, High Executor. Watched our entertainment transmissions. Analyzed our public communications. You assumed that represented our full capability. A pause. Fatal mistake. We've had functional FTL for 23 years. Kept it classified. Built our fleet in the outer system where your probes couldn't reach. You saw what we wanted you to see. You invaded based on deliberately misleading intelligence. That's impossible. Our sensor networks detected exactly what we broadcast for them to detect. Primitive radio. Chemical rockets. Pre-contact civilization. Okonkwo's tone carried dark satisfaction. We study history, High Executor. Every successful defense begins with enemy underestimating defender capability. You came expecting easy conquest. You got prepared annihilation. The Nexhari fleet strength dropped below 100 ships. Human railguns continued their relentless work. Tungsten penetrators punched through hulls. Point defense networks shredded anything that came close. Debris fields expanded across 3 million kilometers of space. Atmosphere vented in glowing streams. Reactors breached in sequential cascades. Ships that had dominated battlefields for centuries died like insects against a windshield. Then the planetary defense grid activated. Earth's surface erupted with light. Not from cities. From installations hidden beneath oceans, buried in mountains, camouflaged in polar ice. 240 ground-based mass drivers, each larger than the orbital platforms, each carrying firepower that dwarfed ship-mounted weapons. They'd been building for 9 years. Mining entire asteroids for tungsten. Constructing accelerator barrels 3 kilometers long. Installing fusion reactors the size of city blocks to power electromagnetic coils that could launch projectiles at 0.6 light speed. The ground installations fired simultaneously. 2,880 tungsten rounds, each massing 10 tons, accelerated to 180,000 kilometers per second. The kinetic energy from a single round exceeded the Tsar Bomba's yield 50-fold. 2,880 such rounds crossed the distance from Earth to the Nexhari fleet in 4.7 seconds. Salvex had time to see them coming. Time to understand complete annihilation approached. Time to realize his entire fleet, everything the Nexhari Ascendancy had sent to enforce council decrees, would cease to exist in less than 5 seconds. All ships, he transmitted, voice breaking. I'm sorry. The planetary bombardment arrived. Nexhari ships didn't explode. They disintegrated. 10-ton penetrators moving at relativistic speeds released kinetic energy measured in gigatons. Matter compressed beyond molecular cohesion. Atomic bonds shattered. Ships became expanding plasma spheres that consumed everything within 2-kilometer radii. The vacuum filled with fusion fire. Shockwaves propagated through debris fields. Secondary explosions cascaded as dying ships collided with the already dead. In 37 seconds, the remaining Nexhari fleet strength dropped to 0. Chief Du Bois monitored the planetary defense grid from Reckoning's engineering station. Ground installations reporting successful firing sequence. All 240 sites nominal. 0 malfunctions. Reload cycle initiated. Next salvo ready in 40 seconds. Won't be necessary, Lieutenant Park said quietly. Her tactical display showed empty space where the Nexhari fleet had been moments before. Threat eliminated. Confirming 0 enemy contacts. All hostile signatures terminated. Officer Zhang scanned communication frequencies. Picking up scattered emergency transmissions. Escape pods. Lifeboats. Individual survivors in damaged ship sections. Counting, approximately 4,000 individual signals across 3 million kilometers. Okonkwo stood from his command chair. Walked to the main viewport. Stared at the debris field that had been 947 warships. Floating wreckage. Expanding plasma clouds. Frozen bodies tumbling through vacuum. The cost of underestimating humanity. Dispatch rescue craft. Recover survivors. We're not butchers. Commander? Park sounded surprised. They came to cleanse our planet. We destroyed their fleet. That's sufficient. Okonkwo's voice hardened slightly. But Zhang, make sure every survivor understands what happened here. Make absolutely certain they communicate what they witnessed to whatever remains of Nexhari command. We want the message clear. What message, sir? That humanity doesn't start wars. Okonkwo turned from the viewport. But we damn sure finish them. Across the human fleet, crews secured from battle stations. Damage control teams assessed minimal casualties. 62 personnel injured across 36 ships. 2 crew members killed when a Nexhari particle beam penetrated TCSS relentless secondary shields. The human fleet had engaged nearly 1,000 enemy vessels and lost 94 people. The Nexhari Ascendancy's enforcement fleet had been effectively annihilated. 947 ships destroyed. Estimated casualties exceeding 400,000. Survivors numbered in the thousands. Prisoners who would carry humanity's message across the galaxy. In the shattered bridge section of what had been Eternal Dominion, High Executor Salvex floated among the dead. Emergency systems barely maintained atmosphere. Cold seeped through failing environmental controls. He'd commanded fleets that subjugated species. Enforced council will across dozens of systems. Never lost more than 10% casualties in any engagement. Now his entire fleet was gone. Everything destroyed in 43 minutes of combat against an enemy intelligence reported as primitive. His communication panel still functioned. A human transmission incoming. He accepted with numb fingers. Commander Okonkwo's face appeared on the damaged display. High Executor Salvex. You're being recovered along with other survivors. You'll be treated, fed, and eventually returned to your government. When you reach Nexhari space, deliver this message to your leadership. Salvex said nothing. Just stared at the human commander with the eyes of the utterly defeated. The Galactic Council banned humanity from manufacturing weapons. You came to enforce compliance. What you encountered today wasn't a military fleet. These were mining vessels. Industrial equipment. Asteroid processing platforms converted for defensive operations. The Council banned weapons. We built tools. Okonkwo's expression remained calm. Almost friendly. Now imagine what we could accomplish if the Council actually authorized us to construct military equipment. Imagine what humanity could build if we weren't restricted to civilian technology. The transmission continued. Your fleet represented approximately 6% of total Nexhari military strength. We destroyed it with zero capital ship losses using mining equipment and defensive installations. The math is simple, High Executor. Tell your government. Tell the Council. Tell every species that considers humanity an easy target. Okonkwo leaned closer to the camera. Earth doesn't want war. But if war comes to our doorstep, we will demonstrate exactly why death worlds produce survivors, not victims. The transmission cut. Salvex floated in darkness, surrounded by the bodies of his crew, drifting through debris that had been the pride of his civilization. Through the broken viewports, he saw human rescue craft approaching. Saw bright lights. Saw salvation offered by the species he'd come to annihilate. The irony felt like physical weight. His tactical officer's console still flickered with partial functionality. A single readout remained visible. Final Nexhari fleet casualty count, 947 ships destroyed. 412,863 personnel lost. Human casualties, 94. The numbers didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Yet the wreckage surrounding him proved every digit accurate. A human rescue craft approached his tumbling bridge section. Magnetic clamps engaged with solid thunks that reverberated through the damaged structure. Hull breaches sealed with emergency foam. Warm air began replacing the freezing vacuum. Through the expanding aperture, humans in rescue suits entered. They moved with professional efficiency, checking survivors, administering medical aid, speaking in calm voices. One approached Salvex. Young human female, medical insignia on her suit. High Executor Salvex. I'm Corpsman Rivera. You're safe now. We're taking you to medical facilities aboard TCSS Sanctuary. She examined his wounds with practiced hands. You have multiple lacerations, possible internal injuries, and radiation exposure. Nothing we can't treat. Salvex stared at her. At the enemy who'd annihilated his fleet now offering medical care. Why, he managed. Why save you? Rivera continued applying medical gel to his wounds. Because the war's over, sir. You lost. We won. What happens next is up to your government and ours. She finished sealing his worst injuries. But regardless of politics, nobody dies if we can prevent it. That's who we are. The rescue team secured Salvex to a stretcher. Began moving him toward the rescue craft's airlock. Through the damaged bridge, past floating bodies, through corridors that had been his command center and were now his tomb. As they exited into the rescue craft's sterile interior, he caught one final glimpse of the debris field through a viewport. 947 ships. The greatest enforcement fleet the Nexhari had ever assembled. Reduced to expanding gas and tumbling wreckage by a species the Council considered primitive. By weapons that weren't technically weapons. By humans who'd prepared for 9 years while broadcasting false intelligence and pretending to be helpless. The rescue craft's engines engaged. They accelerated away from the battle site toward human medical ships. Salvex closed his eyes. Tried to process the magnitude of his failure. Tried to imagine explaining this to his government. Tried to conceive what humanity could actually accomplish if they stopped pretending to be weak. Aboard TCSS Reckoning, Commander Okonkwo returned to his command chair. The bridge crew worked quietly, cataloging damage, coordinating rescue operations, compiling after-action reports. The battle had lasted 43 minutes. Casualty ratio, 4,387 to 1. Fleet exchange rate, 947 to 0. The numbers would become legend. Lieutenant Park looked up from her station. Commander, receiving transmission from Earth. Fleet Admiral Chen wants to speak with you. She's asking about what happens next. Okonkwo considered the question. They'd destroyed one enforcement fleet. The Nexhari Ascendancy had 19 more. The Council had 47 member species, many with military forces that dwarfed what humanity had encountered today. This victory, overwhelming as it was, represented one battle. The war was just beginning. Unless they could prevent it entirely. Zhang, prepare a transmission. Broadband. Every frequency the Council monitors. I want this message received across the entire galaxy simultaneously. Sir. If they want to enforce Council decrees, they're welcome to send more fleets. We'll demonstrate the same kinetic solutions. Okonkwo's voice hardened. But if they want to avoid annihilation, there's a simpler path. They can leave humanity alone. They can rescind the weapons ban. They can recognize Earth as a sovereign power with full rights and defensive capabilities. Or. He gestured at the debris field visible through the viewports. They can send more ships and discover what happens when Death World evolution meets industrial engineering at scale. Officer Zhang's fingers moved across her console. Transmission prepared, Commander. Broadcasting on all Council frequencies. The entire galaxy will receive this within 6 hours as the signal propagates. Send it. The transmission launched. Humanity's first official communication to the Galactic Council. Not a plea for recognition. Not a request for membership. A simple statement of capability demonstrated through overwhelming force. 947 destroyed ships spoke louder than any diplomatic correspondence. Outside Reckoning's viewports, the rescue operations continued. Human craft moved through debris fields, recovering survivors, cataloging wreckage, salvaging intact technology. The work would take weeks. Processing prisoners would take months. Explaining to the galaxy what occurred here would take years. But the message was already clear. Humanity had entered the galactic stage. Not as victims. Not as primitives requiring protection or subjugation. As a species capable of annihilating enforcement fleets using industrial equipment. What they could accomplish with actual military authorization remained a question nobody wanted answered. Chief Dubois approached Okonkwo's chair. Commander, engineering teams are requesting permission to begin analyzing recovered Nexhari technology. Especially their FTL systems and shield generators. If we can reverse engineer their. Approved. Priority Alpha. I want full technical specifications within 90 days. Okonkwo pulled up fleet-wide casualty reports. 94 dead. 62 wounded. Acceptable losses for destroying an invasion fleet. Tragic but manageable. And Dubois? Start preliminary designs for actual military vessels. Not mining platforms. Not defensive installations. Real warships built without Council restrictions. Sir, if the Council discovers we're constructing. They just discovered we destroyed their enforcement fleet using mining equipment. Okonkwo smiled thinly. What exactly will they do if we build something actually designed to kill? The question hung in the air. Throughout human space, the same realization spread. The Galactic Council had pushed humanity. Restricted their development. Banned their weapons. Threatened their homeworld. And humanity had responded by annihilating the enforcement mechanism sent to subjugate them. The Council had 3 options: recognize Earth's sovereignty, send more fleets to die against kinetic weapons, or leave humanity alone and hope the Death World species remained content with defensive capabilities. None of the options favored the Council. All of them empowered humanity. On Earth, in orbital stations, across Luna and Mars and the outer colonies, humans watched the battle's aftermath on every screen. Saw the debris field. Saw the casualty numbers. Saw their species defeat a galactic power using converted industrial equipment. Pride mixed with grim determination. They'd won one battle. The war, if war came, would require more. But they'd demonstrated something the galaxy hadn't seen in millennia. They'd shown what happened when a species evolved on a death world, developed industrial civilization, and faced existential threat. They adapted. They improvised. They won. The Galactic Council had tried to restrict human weapons development. They'd sent a fleet to enforce compliance. That fleet now tumbled through Sol system as frozen wreckage and expanding plasma. The survivors would carry humanity's message to every corner of Council space. Earth doesn't start wars. But when war comes to our doorstep, we finish them. Completely. Finally. Without mercy for the aggressor or hesitation in our response. The message was sent. The demonstration complete. Now the galaxy would decide humanity's future. Would the Council recognize Earth's sovereignty? Would they send more fleets to die against kinetic weapons? Or would they simply leave humanity alone? Commander Okonkwo suspected the answer would arrive within weeks. Either diplomatic recognition or another invasion fleet. Possibly both simultaneously as different Council factions struggled to process the implications. He hoped for peace. Prepared for war. And quietly authorized engineering teams to begin designing weapons that weren't disguised mining equipment. Real warships. Real weapons. Real military capability without restrictions or limitations. If the Council wanted to see what humanity could actually accomplish when fully committed to warfare, they would provide that education. Thoroughly. Decisively. Until then, the rescue operations continued. Survivors recovered. Technology salvaged. Victory catalogued and analyzed for future reference. The battle for Sol system had lasted 43 minutes. The war for humanity's place in the galaxy was just beginning. The transmission propagated across the galaxy at light speed. 6 hours for the signal to reach the nearest Council monitoring stations. 12 hours to penetrate deep into Council space. 18 hours before every species with FTL communication capability received humanity's message. The signal carried full tactical data. Battle footage. Casualty reports. Wreckage coordinates. Everything the galaxy needed to understand what happened when you threatened Earth. Commander Okonkwo remained on TCSS Reckoning's bridge throughout the recovery operations. 48 hours without sleep. His crew rotated through rest shifts, but he stayed, watching rescue craft move through debris fields, monitoring prisoner processing, coordinating salvage operations. Lieutenant Park brought him coffee at hour 36. He accepted it with a nod but didn't drink. Just held the warm cup and stared at tactical displays showing 3 million kilometers of wreckage. "Commander," Officer Zhang said quietly. "Intercepting transmissions from the edge of Council space. Multiple species monitoring what happened here. They're updating their strategic databases. Sol system is being flagged as Omega-level threat." Omega-level? Highest threat classification in Council military doctrine. Reserved for species capable of destroying enforcement fleets with minimal casualties. There are currently 3 other Omega-level civilizations in the galaxy. Now there are 4. Okonkwo finally sipped his coffee. Cold. He drank it anyway. How many species are updating their star charts to avoid human space? All of them, sir. Every transmission we're intercepting includes instructions to avoid Sol system. Maintain minimum 10 light-year exclusion zone. Do not engage under any circumstances without Council authorization and fleet superiority of at least 10 to 1. Zhang paused. Sir, they're afraid of us. Good. Okonkwo set the empty cup down. Fear prevents wars. Respect prevents invasions. We just taught the galaxy both lessons simultaneously. Chief Dubois emerged from engineering, carrying a datapad. Commander, preliminary analysis of recovered Nexari technology. Their FTL drives use exotic matter compression. We can replicate it. Their shield generators use multiphase energy matrices that we can improve. Their weapon systems are, honestly, inferior to what we've already built. But their sensor arrays are extraordinary. With modifications, we could detect fleet movements up to 40 light-years away. Integrate everything useful into next-generation designs. Discard the rest. Already started, sir. Engineering teams across the fleet are compiling recommendations. We're looking at 6th-generation human warships that will make the Nexari dreadnoughts look like toys. Dubois smiled slightly. If the Council thought converted mining platforms were impressive, wait until they see what we build when we're not pretending anymore. On the medical ship TCSS Sanctuary, High Executor Salvex regained consciousness in a sterile recovery room. Human doctors had treated his injuries with technology that exceeded Nexari medical capabilities. Wounds sealed. Internal damage repaired. Radiation exposure neutralized. He sat up slowly, testing limbs that should have required months of regeneration therapy. The humans had accomplished it in 48 hours. A human medical officer entered. Older male, graying hair, calm expression. High Executor. I'm Dr. Harrison. How are you feeling? Alive. Salvex's voice came out hoarse. Which surprises me. You suffered significant trauma. Multiple lacerations, internal hemorrhaging, radiation exposure. We've stabilized everything. You'll make full recovery. Harrison checked readings on a medical display. You're being processed with other survivors. Approximately 3,847 Nexari personnel recovered alive from the engagement. All receiving medical care. All will be repatriated to your government within 30 days. 3,847. Out of 412,863. Less than 1% survival rate. Salvex closed his eyes. Why are you treating us? We came to destroy you. Because the war's over. You lost. We won. What happens next depends on your government's response to our message. Harrison's expression remained professional. High Executor, you're a prisoner of war, but you're also a witness. When you return to Nexari space, you'll testify about what you saw here. You'll explain how an enforcement fleet was annihilated by converted mining equipment. You'll describe human tactical capabilities, technological advancement, and strategic preparation. Your testimony will influence whether the Council recognizes Earth's sovereignty or sends more fleets to die. They'll send more fleets. The Council doesn't accept defeat from primitives. Then those fleets will share your fleet's fate. Harrison moved toward the door, paused. High Executor, humanity evolved on a death world. Highest gravity among inhabited planets. Atmospheric composition that would kill most species. Predators that hunt in packs and never stop pursuing prey. We didn't become apex predators by surrendering when threatened. We became apex predators by eliminating threats completely. He gestured at the medical equipment keeping Salvex alive. We can show mercy to defeated enemies. But we will not accept subjugation. Ever. Make sure your government understands that distinction. The door closed. Salvex lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Through the viewport, he could see human ships moving in perfect formations. Precision. Efficiency. Deadly calm professionalism. The species he'd come to conquer had demonstrated technological sophistication, tactical superiority, and strategic patience that exceeded anything in Council records. And they'd accomplished it while restricted by weapons bans and classified development programs. What could they accomplish without restrictions? The question terrified him more than the battle had. Aboard Reckoning, Officer Zhang received a priority transmission. Commander, incoming communication from Nexhari government. They're requesting immediate negotiation for prisoner release and formal recognition of human sovereignty. Okonkwo raised an eyebrow. How fast did they fold? Message originated 42 minutes ago. They received our transmission and responded within 30 minutes of confirmation. Zhang pulled up the full text. They're offering full diplomatic recognition, immediate cessation of hostilities, prisoner exchange, technology sharing agreements, and removal of all Council weapons restrictions on human space. Everything we wanted. Yes, sir. Without negotiation. Complete capitulation. Lieutenant Park looked up from tactical. Commander, also receiving communications from 17 other Council species. All requesting diplomatic channels. All expressing interest in establishing formal relations with Earth. Several are offering mutual defense pacts. They smell blood in the water, Okonkwo said. The Council's enforcement mechanism just got annihilated. Every species that resented Council authority is reconsidering their position. They see humanity as potential ally against Council overreach. He considered the implications. Zhang, draft responses. Polite but non-committal. We'll establish diplomatic relations on our terms, not theirs. Make it clear, Earth is interested in peace, trade, and mutual respect. But we will not be used as anyone's weapon against the Council. Understood, sir. The bridge settled into quiet efficiency. Battle stations secured. Damage reports finalized. Casualty lists completed. Final count, 94 dead, 62 wounded. Against Nexhari losses exceeding 412,000. The mathematics of the engagement would become legend. The tactics would be studied in military academies across the galaxy. The weaponry would spark arms races among every species with industrial capacity. Humanity had entered galactic civilization not as supplicants but as conquerors of those who'd attempted conquest. The psychological impact couldn't be overstated. Chief Dubois returned to the bridge 12 hours later with updated reports. Commander, salvage operations 90% complete. We've recovered intact Nexhari technology samples, including FTL drives, shield generators, exotic matter compression systems, and advanced sensor arrays. Engineering estimates we can integrate improvements into our existing designs within 6 months. Additionally, we've cataloged wreckage distribution across Sol system. Debris will pose navigational hazard for approximately 3 years before clearing operations complete. And our fleet status? All 36 dreadnoughts operational. Minor damage to TCSS Relentless and TCSS Vindication from direct hits, but nothing structural. Repair estimates 2 weeks for full restoration. Railgun systems performed beyond specifications. Point defense networks exceeded all projections. Ground-based mass drivers functioned flawlessly. Sir, every system we built worked exactly as designed. Okonkwo allowed himself a small smile. 9 years of preparation. 43 minutes of battle. Total victory. Yes, sir. On Earth, planetary celebrations erupted. Humanity had faced its first contact with hostile aliens and achieved overwhelming victory. Cities lit up with fireworks. Orbital stations broadcast footage of the engagement. Military recruitment centers saw lines around entire city blocks. The species that evolved as persistence predators and pack hunters had demonstrated those traits at interstellar scale. The psychological impact couldn't be measured. Earth wasn't a target anymore. Earth was a threat. The Galactic Council convened emergency sessions. 47 member species debating humanity's status. Some argued for immediate recognition and diplomatic integration. Others demanded sanctions and isolation. A few suggested forming coalition fleet to enforce original weapons bans. That suggestion died when casualty projections circulated. Human kinetic weapons had proven devastatingly effective against energy-based defensive systems. Any enforcement fleet would suffer similar losses unless fundamental tactical doctrines changed. No species volunteered to test those doctrines against human weapons. Within 72 hours of the battle, the Council passed formal resolution. Earth granted full sovereign recognition. All weapons restrictions removed. Humanity invited to send diplomatic delegation to Council chambers. The species that had been labeled primitive and pre-contact was now acknowledged as peer power with full rights and responsibilities. The vote was unanimous. Fear motivated species more effectively than principle. Commander Okonkwo stood before Reckoning's main viewport, watching the last rescue operations conclude. 3,847 prisoners recovered and treated. 947 ships destroyed. 412,000 Nexari dead. Earth's casualties, 94 killed, 62 wounded. The ratios spoke for themselves. Lieutenant Park approached quietly. Commander, Fleet Admiral Chen is requesting your presence on Earth. They want to brief you for diplomatic missions to Council space. You'll be representing humanity in first official contact negotiations. Me? You commanded the defense. Destroyed the enforcement fleet. Sent the message that changed everything. You're the logical choice to explain human capabilities and limitations to the Council. Park smiled slightly. Also, your calm demeanor during the battle became legendary. Every species monitoring transmissions heard your voice. Professional, measured, deadly calm. That's the image humanity wants to project. Okonkwo considered. Diplomatic missions. Formal negotiations. Political maneuvering. It sounded exhausting compared to fleet command. But someone had to represent Earth's interests. Someone who understood military capability and tactical reality. Someone the aliens feared and respected. When do we depart? 72 hours. TCSS Reckoning will serve as diplomatic vessel. Full honor guard. We're making an entrance. Of course we are. Zhang called from communications. Commander, final message from recovered Nexari prisoners. They're requesting permission to send formal thanks to human medical personnel. Apparently our doctors saved 317 lives that Nexari medicine couldn't have preserved. Permission granted. And Zhang? Make sure that detail gets included in official reports. The galaxy should know we can be merciful to defeated enemies. Yes, sir. The bridge crew continued their work. Professional. Efficient. Proud. They defended humanity's homeworld against overwhelming odds and achieved total victory. They'd demonstrated human capability at scale. They'd sent a message the galaxy couldn't ignore: Earth doesn't start wars, but when war comes to our doorstep, we finish it. Completely. Decisively. Without hesitation. Okonkwo touched the viewport, feeling the cold reinforced glass beneath his fingers. Beyond, stars filled the darkness. 300 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Hundreds of species spread across thousands of light years. Complex politics, ancient rivalries, deep-rooted fears. Humanity had just entered that complexity as major power. The implications would unfold over decades. Maybe centuries. But the foundation was set. Earth wasn't prey. Earth wasn't victim. Earth was sovereign power capable of defending itself against any threat through superior technology, tactical excellence, and species unity against existential danger. The Nexari had learned that lesson. The galaxy would learn it too. Chief Du Bois joined him at the viewport. "Commander, engineering wants authorization to begin construction on next-generation warships. Real military vessels. Not converted mining platforms. Ships designed from the start for combat operations with no restrictions or limitations." How long until first vessels operational? 18 months for prototype. 3 years for production fleet. We're talking about vessels that make our current dreadnoughts look like scout ships. 50 million tons displacement. 1,000 railgun batteries. Point defense networks that could shred asteroids. FTL drives twice as fast as Nexari systems. Shield generators using improved multi-phase technology. "Commander, we're designing warships that could take on entire fleets alone." Okonkwo turned from the viewport. Met Du Bois's eyes. "Build them. And Chief? Make them beautiful. Make them terrifying. Make them undeniable proof that humanity belongs among the stars." "Yes, sir." The conversation ended. The crew returned to their duties. TCSS Reckoning began preparations for departure to Council space. Humanity's first diplomatic mission. First official contact as recognized sovereign power. First step into galactic civilization not as primitives but as equals who'd proven their capability through overwhelming force. Outside the viewports, debris from 947 destroyed ships tumbled through Sol system. A monument to alien arrogance. A testament to human preparation. A warning to anyone who considered Earth an easy target. The battle had lasted 43 minutes. The message would last millennia. Commander Marcus Okonkwo smiled slightly, feeling pride in his species, his crew, his civilization. They'd been underestimated. Dismissed as primitives. Threatened with orbital cleansing. And they'd responded by annihilating the enforcement fleet using converted mining equipment. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. One that would echo across Council space for generations. One that would prevent wars before they started and establish humanity's place among the stars. Don't threaten Earth unless you're prepared for the consequences. Because humanity doesn't bow. Humanity doesn't break. And humanity never forgets those who tried to make us kneel. We're persistence predators from a death world. We hunt what threatens us. We never stop pursuing our prey. And when cornered, we don't surrender. We win.